A tone plays and your brain changes. But why? Let's go back to where the story begins. In 1924, in a small clinic in Jena, Germany, a psychiatrist named Hans Berger placed electrodes on a young patient's scalp and watched a pen trace across paper. He wasn't measuring the heart or muscles. He was trying to record thought. To almost everyone around him, the idea sounded impossible. But the line on the paper didn't stay flat. It rose and fell, in slow, repeating waves. For the first time, a human brain had been seen, not as a silent organ, but as a rhythmic one. Those recordings, published a few years later, would be named the electroencephalogram, or EEG, and they revealed something surprising. The brain is never still. Even at rest, it pulses with electrical rhythms that change with our state of mind. Today, those rhythms have familiar names. Delta waves, slow and high in amplitude, show up during deep sleep. Theta waves, a bit faster, appear in drowsiness, light sleep, and certain meditative states. Alpha waves, 8 to 13 cycles per second, dominate when we're awake but relaxed, eyes gently closed, attention turned inward. Beta and gamma waves, faster and more complex, emerge when we're focused, solving problems, or processing demanding information. These are not sounds. They're patterns of electrical activity, synchronized firing of millions of neurons. But they raise a natural question. If the brain is rhythmic, what happens when it meets external rhythms? Humans have been surrounded by rhythm since long before EEG, the drip of water in a cave, footsteps in ritual dances, drums echoing across plains, chanting in temples and churches. Long before anyone spoke about brainwaves, people noticed that repetitive sound could change how they felt. Calmer, more focused, sometimes almost transported. Modern neuroscience doesn't throw this away. It tries to explain it. To do that, it starts with something simple. What is sound? Physically, sound is just vibration. Pressure waves moving through air, water, or solid objects. Those waves reach the ear, become tiny mechanical movements, then get converted into electrical signals sent to the brain. From that point on, sound is no longer out there. It's patterns of neural firing inside the nervous system. And that's where things get interesting, because the brain doesn't just detect patterns. It tries to synchronize with them when doing so is efficient. This tendency has a name, entrainment. In the 17th century, the Dutch scientist Christian Huygens noticed that two pendulum clocks mounted on the same wall gradually fell into step with each other. Even when started out of sync, their rhythms aligned over time. The same principle appears across biology. Fireflies flashing in unison, heart cells pulsing together, neural networks timing their activity. When scientists talk about brainwave entrainment, they mean this: external, repetitive stimulation. A flashing light, a pulsing tone, a rhythmic vibration can nudge the brain's own rhythms towards certain frequency ranges for a short time. Not like a switch being flipped. More like a crowd gradually clapping in time with a drum. One of the most famous examples involves sound and a curious illusion discovered in the 19th century. In 1839, the physicist Heinrich Wilhelm Dove found that when two slightly different tones are played separately to each ear, listeners don't just hear two pitches. They perceive a third rhythm, a gentle pulsing at the difference between the two. For example, 300 hertz in the left ear, 310 hertz in the right. The listener reports a 10 hertz beat, even though no speaker is actually playing 10 hertz. This is a binaural beat, an auditory illusion created by the brain itself. Much later, with EEG available, researchers started to ask, if the brain is inventing this internal rhythm, does its own electrical activity sometimes follow along? And if it does, could that be used to influence relaxation, attention, or mood? Over the past decades, scientists have tried to answer this systematically. In one line of research, participants listened to rhythmic auditory stimulation, sometimes pure tones, sometimes complex soundscapes, while their brain activity is monitored. Some studies report that specific alpha range stimulations around 8 to 12 Hz can increase power in alpha bands and are associated with feelings of relaxation in certain groups. Others show that low-frequency stimulation after physical exertion can shift the balance of the autonomic nervous system toward parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest branch, with people reporting feeling calmer after exercise. At the same time, a systematic review of clinical trials found that while many studies report positive effects of audio brain entrainment on mood, pain, or anxiety, results are not consistent across all experiments. Some designs are small, some lack proper blinding, and not all findings replicate. The picture that emerges is nuanced. Sound can modulate brain activity, but it is not a guaranteed shortcut to any specific mental state. Binaural beats specifically have attracted extra attention. Clinical and experimental studies suggest, in some contexts, certain binaural beat frequencies appear to reduce anxiety, especially when used before or during stressful procedures like surgery or medical exam. In other words, they are not digital magic. They are one tool whose effects depend on frequency, timing, individual differences, and the overall health of the nervous system. Beyond binaural beats, there is a broader landscape of sound-based therapies. Music therapy, using structured music interventions to support emotional and cognitive health, has evidence for benefits in depression, anxiety, and conditions like dementia. As an adjunct to standard care, sound baths with gongs or singing bowls, guided meditations using repetitive sound, and app-based ambient soundscapes are being explored as complementary strategies to reduce stress and improve sleep. Recent reviews emphasize that these approaches are best understood as supports, non-invasive tools that may increase relaxation or reduce symptom burden, not substitutes for medical or psychological treatment in serious mental health conditions. At the same time, researchers are already imagining more personalized futures, adaptive systems that tracks your brain activity in real time and adjusts sound patterns dynamically, using neurofeedback to help people steer their own brain states more reliably. The science is still young. The promises are big. The evidence is growing, but incomplete. So, why do certain sounds feel calming right now, in everyday life? If we strip away the marketing and keep only what the science supports, a few themes remain. First, the brain is rhythmic. It constantly organizes activity into patterns that reflect what we're doing and feeling. Second, sound is a structured stimulus. When it's steady, predictable, and not too intense, it reduces uncertainty in the environment. Third, under the right conditions, when a person is willing, not overwhelmed, and feels safe, repetitive sound can help the brain settle into more efficient patterns, requiring less effort to monitor the world. Sometimes that shows up as small but measurable shifts in EEG, sometimes as lower heart rate, slower breathing, and subjective reports of calm, and sometimes as nothing at all, because there is no single frequency that calms every brain in every situation. The story, then, is less magical, but more interesting. Sound doesn't reprogram the brain. It interacts with a rhythmic system that is already there, shaped by genetics, history, health, and the moment you're in. The right sound, at the right time, in the right context, doesn't seize control. It gives the brain something reliable to lean on, a pattern in a noisy world. And when the brain recognizes that the pattern is stable and the environment is safe, it can finally afford to let go. That's why a quiet fan, a distant train, soft rain, or a carefully designed piece of audio can feel like a blanket for the nervous system. Not because a number on a screen has secret power, but because a rhythmic, predictable world is one in which the brain can rest. And that is how certain sounds help us feel calm.